as we start with the icebreaker, we'd really like to hear from all of you. So it's going to be interactive since we have a small number with us today. Okay. All right. So happy to see everyone here and so happy to hear from all of you in the chat, joining us from all around the world. So for our icebreaker, I wanted to ask you, if you can travel anywhere after COVID, where would that be and why? And I'm guessing everyone will probably go. So if anyone would like to start, feel free to unmute yourself and just let us know, where would you like to go anywhere in the world once this nonsense with COVID is over?
Hi, Balkis, I'm happy to go first. So this is very practical, I guess, in terms of where I'm planning to go, hopefully for this summer, to Hawaii. I've never been. It looks beautiful. My mother is turning 60 this year, so we're celebrating her 60th in Hawaii.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Happy birthday to her. Yeah, Hawaii seems like a really cool idea. Very far away from where I am now, but totally understandable for people in the US. Okay, so who would like to go next? Feel free to unmute yourself and let us know where you'd like to go.
Hi, I'm Lisa. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So I put it in the chat, but my intent is to get to go on the scuba diving trip that was scheduled for June that got pushed to September in the Philippines.
Oh, wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, definitely sounds like a good idea. I really hope you guys can push with it, because I know things are crazy now, especially with the fourth wave and everything happening. Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing. Okay, what about the rest?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nina. I had a trip planned to Tokyo this past April that I had to cancel with my best friend and partner, and I have never been to Asia before, so I am hoping to be able to reschedule that soon.
Wow, yeah, that sounds like fun. Definitely a lot of great places that we can go to. Thank you for sharing. What about the rest of you guys?
I'll tack on to Nina's comment that if I could go somewhere next, I'd love to go to Kazakhstan. Had a really close former colleague from there that invited me very graciously many times and would love to take her up on that offer.
Yeah, wow, that's very interesting, definitely. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. Okay, anyone else would like to share with us? If you want to type in the chat, feel free to do so, but just to make it more interactive, if you can unmute yourself, that would be better.
This is Celia. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I would love to go just to a nice quiet beach in the Caribbean, probably alone or with my husband, but leave my kids with someone else for a while to just have a break after this crazy year of pandemic parenting.
Oh God, yeah, totally understandable. I'm not a parent, but I had to work a couple of days next to my nieces, and I don't even know how parents do it. Yeah, it's such crazy times. Thank you for sharing. Okay, anyone else? We still have a few minutes if someone would like to share.
Hi, this is Carmen, also from DC. I'm actually looking forward to getting out and about in the United States a bit more now that things are opening back up.
Yeah, no, I understand. I would also, if I can go, I would probably travel inside of Tunisia, because there are so many places that we can see, which I cannot do now because of the curfew and everything happening. But yeah, I totally understand that. Okay, we still have 1 more minute if anyone else would like to share with us, or we can just go ahead and start with the presentation.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm so excited to meet all of you today. I am Dr. Nseba Setum. I'm a lecturer in Akwa Ibom State University in Nigeria. So it's so sad that because of COVID-19 pandemic, people cannot move out easily and go to wherever they want to be. but I really want to travel with my family, with my kids to Dubai on vacation after the pandemic, because I've been to Dubai 2 times and I've seen that it's such a beautiful location for vacation. So I would like to visit Dubai deserts and Dubai Love Garden with my family. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Dubai does seem like a nice idea, though really, really hot, I think, this time of the year. But yeah, it's definitely a great location. Okay, thank you everyone for sharing that with us. I really hope we'll get to go and that nothing gets canceled. So what will happen now is that since we have the slide up, if you are joining us and you're not a member of our COP, the way you can join is to go to youthpower.org. You need to create a profile, and then once you register, please go to communities, and under communities, you'll find Youth Engagement COP, which you see at the very end. So you just need to click on it, join, you join us and join our platform, and that way you'll be able to interact with more members. You can see who's in there. You can even connect with them. You'll receive updates from me, from anyone who's leading the COP, and just great way to interact with everyone. So please do join us and do sign up for our community of practice if you haven't yet. And now I would like to introduce our speaker, who's also a member of the COP. We have Sarah Johnson with us from the US. She's the technical advisor for the Youth Agency and Engagement at the International Youth Federation. So Sarah is responsible for providing strategic leadership for the organization and supporting existing projects and business development efforts in the areas of youth agency, leadership, civic education, and meaningful youth engagement. She's also charged with ensuring the International Youth Federation designs and implements holistic positive youth development programming that is socially inclusive and promotes greater equity for reserved populations. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being with us today. She will be talking about our topic, and Sarah, I'll give you the floor to go ahead and start. Just one last thing. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to add them in the chat, and then we'll address them after Sarah finishes her presentation. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Balkis. Hi, everybody. Can you see my notes or just the slide?
Just the slides.
Beautiful. Cool. Well, I'm excited to be here with you all today in a bit of a smaller group. So appreciate your time and attention as I share some things that I found really interesting. But then I'm looking forward to discussing with you all after some ideas and questions that we all have as a group. So quick overview, I'm here today to give you 6 tips that I've learned about measuring youth engagement in my experiences at IYF, specifically on a project that I will tell you about. After I give an overview of that project, I'll talk you through some of our measurement priorities and approaches, and then dive into the lessons learned. So today I'm going to be presenting a project that I had the immense pleasure of supporting our Tanzania office with, particularly with the learning aspect. The Kiongozi Fellowship was part of a 2019 Irish aid-funded project called YP2LE that sought to identify, promote, and scale meaningful youth engagement approaches and livelihood models in Tanzania. We recruited 9 young men and women from across Tanzania to participate in a 6-month fellowship experience. In the end, each of these fellows developed their own case study on one promising model to inform the donor's youth strategy and livelihoods programming portfolio. So the fellowship consisted of 4 major components. The first was training and mentorship. Fellows received an orientation to each other, the project, and to the foundations of positive youth development, and then had 3 subsequent skills building workshops specifically designed to support them to conduct the assignments expected of them and prepare for and participate in various engagement activities with the donor and community. The second component was research. fellows conducted their own primary and secondary research to learn more about their selected model and gather perspectives from their peers on it. The third component was a co-design workshop, which took place after the initial research phase and brought the fellows and donor together to workshop some preliminary ideas and recommendations. And then the culminating event was a public dialogue that brought together young people, the donor, and key members of the government and local youth serving institutions to discuss youth livelihoods and engagement and reflect on the fellows' findings and recommendations. So one thing that was important for us was for fellows to inform the design of this experience from the start. So they identified skills that they were strong and weak in, which informed how we developed our training content. They shortlisted and selected their preferred livelihoods models for further exploration. They managed their own research budgets and work plans, and they designed the agendas for and facilitated the co-design workshop and dialogue event. So what about our measurement priorities? So the overall goal for this engagement was for youth livelihoods programming to be more responsive to the needs and wants of young Tanzanians because they were meaningfully engaged in its design. In order to accomplish this, the IRF team felt three things needed to happen. First, the fellows needed the skills and information necessary to develop and propose livelihood models and engagement preferences. Second, partner staff needed the capacity to apply the principles of positive youth development in their programs and strategy. And third, fellows and partner staff needed to participate equally in co-designing the models and approaches. So in green, I've included some of the indicators that we used in our results framework that are relevant to today's discussion on measuring youth engagement. Under objective 1, there is an output indicator related to the number of trainings, and then an outcome indicator related to the number and percent of youth with an increase in relevant skills. Under objective 2, we had an indicator related to increased staff knowledge of PYD, then a couple of outcome indicators related to changes in activities or services based on youth input, and positive changes in adult perceptions of youth. So this objective for us really captured that enabling environment domain of the PYD framework and our desire to understand what it takes to create more youth-friendly norms and policies. And then finally, for objective 3, we included an indicator on satisfaction with type and level of engagement for both the young people and adults participating. So for those of you on the line that are familiar with Youth Power's PYD framework, hopefully what you'll see here is a measurement plan that touches on all 4 domains. So youth assets and agency, their contribution, and also a positive enabling environment. Well, Keith, I'll assume those comments are not to me yet, unless you interrupt me and tell me otherwise, but I'm ignoring the chat if that's fine.
Yeah, you're all good.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So we used a number of tools to inform our learning agenda and activities. First, I have to shout out Youth Power's PYD measurement toolkit and the Measuring Youth Engagement technical brief. Nobody has paid me to say that on this Youth Power community of practice. I honestly found them extremely helpful in thinking through what the important outcomes might be and how we could approach measuring them. We also adapted a couple of tools, including Kenneth Jones' Involvement and Interaction Rating Scale and FHI 360's Youth Programming Assessment Tool, or YPAT, as it's often shortened to. And then here's just kind of a glimpse of the timeline, what our measurement and evaluation and learning plan looked like. The tools or adapted measures ultimately informed the following learning activities: a baseline survey for the fellows, simple surveys after each workshop and public event, a focus group discussion with fellows at the conclusion of the project, and a skills retrospective survey for the fellows. Okay, so I've given you the background. Hopefully you understand the project context sufficiently. Let's talk about what I learned and what recommendations I have for this community of practice when we talk about measuring youth engagement. So the first tip that I have is to teach young people about youth engagement before asking them how they feel about it. Social desirability bias is a type of response bias where survey respondents answer questions in a manner that will be viewed favorably by others. This can take the form of over-reporting good behavior or under-reporting bad or undesirable behavior. Originally, we were thinking to measure changes in fellows' perceptions of their engagement at baseline and exit. And as you can see in this chart, at baseline, all of the fellows reported feeling engaged in their development and like adults valued their perspectives and ideas. However, these feelings quickly changed once they went through a Foundations of Positive Youth Development training and learned about the types and levels of engagement that are possible. Many express that they actually feel their involvement is often decorative or tokenistic. So this highlighted for us the importance of providing an overview of meaningful youth engagement and establishing some shared standards and vocabulary before asking young people to share their perception of theirs. A second tip I have is to plan routine pulse checks to adapt activities and improve the engagement experience. Put differently, don't wait until the end to assess your youth engagement. Monitor it throughout to identify quick changes. So at the end of every training workshop, we had in-person debriefs where fellows gave feedback to IYF staff and each other. We also used simple post-workshop surveys to assess satisfaction with learning content, facilitation, logistics, and to gauge how they were feeling about their upcoming assignments. This really helped us to make all sorts of big and small adjustments. For example, we started giving more per diem instead of scheduling all of the meals ourselves, because as you can see in the orange quote, after one workshop, a fellow noted that everything was good, but the food didn't play well with the stomachs. For dinner, we should be given a dinner stipend. So a seemingly small thing, but if addressed, can go a long way in making young people feel like their perspectives matter. This also helped us to better target our training content and how much time we spent on specific topics. So in this table, for example, you'll see responses to our question, which activities, if any, do you need additional information or support on? And we noted that fellows felt comfortable about engaging their peers on social media and planning for the next workshop, but needed more help with writing and editing their case studies and synthesizing and presenting their research in a clear and compelling manner. A third tip I have is to disaggregate your data to understand what different stakeholders value about youth engagement. So I suspect many of us are familiar with best practices around disaggregating our data by certain demographic characteristics, such as sex, age, education, or socioeconomic status. But in projects where you have intergenerational partnerships or multi-stakeholder alliances, it can be useful to capture feedback based on participant profile or organizational affiliation. So this chart depicts responses from an event evaluation that we had people fill out after the final public dialogue. The question asked, which feature of today's event had the biggest impact on you? And as reported here, as a simple % of total participants, one would assume that most people's favorite part was understanding different livelihoods program models that can reduce youth unemployment and underemployment in Tanzania. However, when we broke the analysis down further by participant type, we understood a different story. We saw that more young people than any other group said that they benefited from experiencing youth engagement firsthand by participating in a youth-led event. We also saw that donors and local government officials specifically cited a greater understanding of the various livelihood models as beneficial. So this insight helped us to think through different ways that we might pitch the value of youth engagement to different stakeholders, including young people, donors, and implementing partners. Okay, bear with me. I'm really gonna dive into the weeds here with this tool that I mentioned earlier. So please permit me just a few minutes to explain the involvement and interaction rating scale that I told you about in the beginning. So actually, let me not skip my fourth tip, which is to be specific about which youth-adult partnerships you are assessing and to do it at the right time. So this tool evaluates the perceptions and experiences of youth and adults working together on community projects. Specifically, it assesses youth involvement, and youth-adult interaction. The results can then be used to define the type of youth-adult relationship occurring or to evaluate experiences and identify areas for improvement. For each of these three areas, as you can see on this slide, there are a set of indicators with statements on the left that reflect low perceptions of involvement and interaction, and statements on the right that reflect high perceptions of involvement and interaction. To use this tool, group members complete the involvement and interaction rating scale, then individual and group averages are calculated for each category to determine if there are low or high levels of involvement and interaction. That's what it looks like. If somebody fills it out, going from left to right, it kind of indicates for that statement or concept, is this generally trending negative or more positive? So in our project, we adapted this tool in the following ways. In the fellows baseline, we asked them to reflect on adult interaction in the various activities or organizations they are involved with in their communities. For partner staff, we asked them as a part of their post-PYD workshop survey to reflect on youth interaction in their projects or communities. And then both groups also rated that youth-adult interaction category for the same relationships. This was cool and helpful. It allowed us to gain important insights into how young people and adults in the project generally felt about working with the other group. For example, in this analysis of the fellows baseline rankings, we noticed that when youth and adults work together, adults seem comfortable working with youth, and both youth and adults indicate mutual learning from one another. This is a good sign. But we also saw that there didn't seem to be that many opportunities for these types of partnerships, as several of the indicators that I just highlighted trended more towards the negative side. And those ones specifically said that adults command youth to follow the directions of adults, and youth and adults rarely help one another develop solutions to social problems. One thing to note is that we were not able to use this data to reflect on the specific dynamic between the fellows and partner staff for this project. And that's because of the way that it was sequenced and which experiences we asked them to reflect on. Hence my tip to know what the tool can teach you, and then be specific about when and for whom you use it if you want to generate data on a partnership within your project context. Tip number 5, engage youth in evaluating success. This is where we used FHI 360's YP2LE tool, and it was a really fun activity. I learned a lot from it. So at the end of the fellowship, we used this tool to give participants the opportunity to rate their satisfaction with and engagement in the project. This assessment form contains a set of standards which are aligned to the PYD framework, and it asks respondents to 1, indicate how often the stated approach or activity occurred during the program, so the frequency of a specific approach. It asks them to rank how important that approach or activity is to them. And then it asks them to provide evidence of when, where, and how it happened to justify their rating. So while this tool gave us lots of great insights into which PYD features we successfully integrated and how, the weighting and importance ranking was less useful at end line, which is where we used it, because everything felt important and useful to the fellows. So if this had been used as a monitoring tool on a longer project and was somehow linked to, activity and budget design, I think it's reasonable to assume that the rankings would have featured more prominently in the assessment. Another simple tool we used at this time to gauge fellows' satisfaction with their engagement was to adapt the Hart's Ladder framework for a facilitated discussion on their experiences and preferences. So in this picture on the right, what you see is that fellows were asked to map each activity that happened in the project on the left side of the ladder based on what actually happened in the project, or the real. And then on the right side, we asked them to reorganize the activities based on what they wish would have happened, or the ideal scenario. And this helped us learn a lot. So the first thing we learned is what the fellows wish they had been more or less involved in. For example, it's small on your screens, but one thing that they moved down from the left to the right was work planning, from a youth-led activity to something they would have preferred us to share decisions on. We also learned about oversights or missteps that rubbed them the wrong way. So on the left at the bottom, you'll see an orange sticky in the layer of manipulation. This immediately stands out to us as program staff because we, always want to avoid, I would say, those bottom three rungs of the ladder where young people are treated as objects. And what they put there was the honorarium. And they gave us really good feedback that the terms of their payment, and specifically how tax would be withheld, was not clearly communicated in the call for applications. Super useful intel. And then the last thing we learned was how IYF could have involved fellows earlier in the process. So for example, they said that they wished they had been involved in the initial design of the case study template and not just the development of the case studies themselves. Cool, so all of these tips kind of lead me to one overarching final tip, which is to fit the tools and the desired results to the time. So if you recall some of our measurement priorities, one of them was wanting to know whether or not fellows had acquired the necessary skills to perform their roles well. The chart I've pulled here is from our skills retrospective survey, which we issued at the conclusion of the fellowship, and it had 14 statements aligned with the 3 domains we felt fellows needed to succeed: leadership and collaboration, research and reporting, and human-centered design and systems thinking. So what this table shows is the average change reported by all fellows, and we're happy to see positive improvements reported across all of the statements. I flagged the skills in green specifically because they showed the highest degree of change, which included knowing how to conduct secondary and internet-based research on a subject and identify whether that information was reliable, having the ability to analyze information and data to form conclusions and recommendations, and being capable of integrating elements of positive youth development into program design. So again, this was extremely validating for us because these skills were really critical to their success in the assignment, and we felt good to know that we had invested our time and efforts in designing appropriate training content. So, could we measure changes in skills and agency from a 6-month fellowship? Absolutely. However, you will also recall that we are curious if adults change their perceptions of youth capabilities and if the donor changed any policies or practices. And I would say both of these outcomes were not measurable in this time frame. So it's really important to be realistic about what you can achieve and fit your measurement approaches accordingly. The last slide I just pulled here, something that came through my inbox this week from USAID's Learning Lab out of their Mexico office. I think on this topic, it's important to just start somewhere. So all of the things that I presented today, it wasn't, a super formal performance evaluation. There wasn't like a huge budget allocation to support these learning activities. It was honestly mostly staff time that was already budgeted on the project. And I think that it's really just helpful to start with what you're curious about and what are the resource parameters on your project and go from there. So when we talk about measuring youth engagement, it doesn't always have to be a formal evaluation. I think as this chart outlines, there are so many different ways that you can go about learning on your project, from monitoring activities to learning activities, pause and reflect activities. And I'm excited to discuss what some of those approaches might be with you all now. So thanks for listening. Balkis, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the very great presentation. I really enjoyed that. Let's all give her a virtual clap. That was really great. Thank you for sharing. So now we'll open the floor for Q&A. And because we're actually, few in the call, I will give you guys the opportunity to unmute yourself and ask your question. I saw that we had a couple from Lisa, Carmen, and Nina. So Lisa, if you'd like to go ahead and ask your questions.
Sure. Sarah, it was very interesting. I think you answered some of them, but can you tell me again, how many were the number of youth that were involved with the project and how many adults then or peer staff were involved?
That's a good question. So there were 9 fellows and there were 4 core support staff from IYF. And then in terms of the engagement with the donor staff, we had 2 primary points of contact with the donor. So that was kind of the core engagement that I focused a lot of this learning on. And then some of that just kind of simple post-workshop or post-event data that we collected was after the final dialogue event, where we had young people from Dodoma. It took place in Dodoma. So that event, I think, had around 120 people and a mix of adults from the government and local implementing partners and also young people from the community. I don't have the numbers from that off the top of my head.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Lisa, if you have any more questions you'd like to add before we move.
I put several in the chat, but
Yeah.
just checking back, the adult staff rated the youth adult partnership, the interaction and involvement at the end, and then the youth and fellows did it at the beginning. I just wanted to clarify what I thought I heard.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the one that I was talking about was actually so donor staff, and they invited some of their implementing partner staff as well. We conducted a PYD training for them, and they assessed, youth involvement and youth adult interaction after that workshop. So that's what I was referring to with that specific tool. IYF staff actually completed the staff assessment form of the YPAT at the end of the project as well and reflected on some of the dynamics in this project. I did not include that in today's presentation, but do have a lot of additional learnings from that as well that I'd be happy to share.
And so as you think about it for structuring for the future, and you want to look at youth adult partnership and the perception of youth and adults in that partnership as it's going through, what would you think through for a strategy for next time?
That's a great question. And part of what I would say that informed my tip is just I would use that tool for a longer engagement. And as sort of like during the middle of the engagement, having that tool be used to reflect on the specific youth adult partnership that was a feature in the project. So the way we used it for this, we learned something generally about how our fellows perceived their interactions with adults went. And, that gave us insight into, okay, like maybe we need to provide more opportunities to support their engagement. And likewise from the donor, seeing some of that feedback helped us think through some of the donor engagement or advocacy we could do. But I think the tool is really valuable if it is applied to a specific partnership. So in this project, we could have used it for IYF staff and the fellows, halfway through the project, and that would have been useful.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, for that. I think if we still have Carmen with us in the chat, she asked about, let me see. She asked if you, did you use any standard instruments for data collection that you might recommend as reference to attendees?
Yeah, and hi, Balkis. Hi, Sarah. I asked that, and then on the next slide, Sarah, or next several slides, Sarah went through those tools in a lot of detail. So I really appreciate that. I guess as a different question, I wondered, Sarah, what interest have you seen from the donor or maybe government partners in learning from some of the lessons that you've presented?
Yeah, it's a good question. And actually, one thing I didn't say about this project is that the fellowship was a component of a 3-component project. In the end, the donor ended up renewing for a 3rd separate component, which was scaling up an existing youth employability project that we had. So I think there's probably some learnings there around perceived value of investing in this type of model. One thing I would say, I'm taking your question in a different direction, and maybe Balkis, we can use this to open it up more broadly to all on the call, is that I think it's really important to measure this stuff to be able to tell the story better and to explain the value to donors. So to really, sometimes they might see like 9-person fellowship, they may be looking at the cost per participant as some donors do. And this becomes really important. And so measuring different outcomes is really key to how we show the importance. And for me, I like learning about it because in the youth power community, this is like a huge gap, like an acknowledged gap, that there needs to be more evidence around youth engagement. And another assessment I just read on kind of PYD programming is that contribution, aka youth engagement, is the most under-incorporated domain in PYD programs. And so I don't know if you all feel the same, but I definitely think like this measurement element and demonstrating the impact and the importance, I think it's probably somehow linked to that occurrence. So would love to open it up to hear other ideas on this.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so we definitely will be interested to hear what you guys think, especially that, developing a tool is part of the deliverables of this community of practice. So yeah, anything that you guys would like to share, please unmute yourself and we'll take the conversation from there.
Hi, Sarah. Hello, Balkis. It's Cecilia here. And Sarah, thank you very much. Your presentation sparked many questions for me, and I really like your last comment about how we present this data and reinforce the message. I mean, we know it's valuable, but how we keep this message, and I'm thinking, agree with the donors and also private sector, everyone, right, to reinforce that. And one thing I'm curious throughout your presentation is how did the adults reacted when they saw the data from the different tool that you show, with the fellowship? Because sometimes we would think as adults, and I'm saying all of us, oh, we encourage youth and all of that, but sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So I think that's also a starting point, and I think it's a key piece of the equation also in youth engagement, because we can be pushing youth. I'm just thinking also as women empowerment, but if we don't talk with the males, it doesn't work. So if we don't talk with the adults and also have everyone on board on the same boat, it doesn't, it's unbalanced. So
yeah, Cecilia, that's a great question. I would say 2 things came to mind. So one, your question makes me think of the importance of cultivating a safe space for that feedback to happen. So some of that candid feedback we got at the end of a really intensive engagement process with experienced youth development practitioners that, understood all the different ways that one needs to engage young people, support, step back, facilitate peer-to-peer learning. So in the end, that was a safe space. We had invested in relationships where they could say like, that honorarium was not cool. And we said, oh my gosh, thank you so much for telling us. So that's one thing that it made me think of, is how critical, those relationships and that knowledge and awareness of how to facilitate things in that way is, to get that honest feedback. Now, coming to the donor, I actually think that one of the failures of, a failure on this project, it was so much process oriented. So like, is the engagement happening? The workshops are happening, yes. And we are so keen to learn about our youth participants that we didn't address the donor perspective as much. And so like, for example, after the co-design workshop, we had a debrief and we, heard from our fellows. That was okay, but like, it didn't really seem like they were interested in our ideas, or we wish they had been more responsive. And then, that's a really key piece of intel that really we should have gone and sat down with them and said, hey, we got this great feedback, and that's like a learning opportunity, a teaching moment. But instead we're like, yeah, we totally know, we can see why you feel that way. Sorry that it happened, and then started preparing for the next workshop. So I think I would say we focus more on like the training, the experience for the fellows, supporting them through the case studies, the co-design workshop, the dialogue event, and that specific youth adult partnership between the donor, we could have invested more time and resources into.
Thank you. I appreciate your candid answer on that one. And I think it's helpful because that's how we use experiences, right? To think about, okay, what would I do different in the next time? Well, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you both for that great introduction. Definitely helpful, I think, for everyone on the call to know. We still have about 3 to 5 minutes for the Q&A. So if you guys have any more questions or just have input that you'd like to share, I think that will be really helpful for the team here.
I'll say one more thing, Balkis. Lisa, you had a comment about youth engagement has a developmental component. It's also something I think a lot about as well. You heard my title. I'm technical advisor for youth agency and engagement. And so, there are youth engagement activities or strategies that very much contribute to youth agency outcomes. And then there are maybe types of engagement that don't necessarily translate into those outcomes. And so I think a lot about, when and under what circumstances does youth engagement support youth agency, and when, is it perhaps more beneficial for project learning or, just reflective of a principle of youth-led development. So I appreciate that comment. And then, yeah, Balkis, I would just ask people, I'm going to turn off my camera. At least how I understood from making sense, this month's session was to get a feel for how many of us are measuring youth engagement, what tools we're using, and what challenges we have. So I talked a lot about my experiences. I would love to hear from you all. How many of us are actively measuring or assessing youth engagement in our projects? What tools are we using? And if not, why do you think that is?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, for the great question. So guys, any input on that? Any thing that you'd like to share from the work that you're doing with youth engagement? So feel free to unmute yourself. And if not, you can just type in the chat. Lisa, would you like to say something? I think I saw that you unmuted yourself.
I just was going to mention that I'm very familiar with the 4-H Youth Development Program. And when we initiated youth adult partnerships, what I would say when we were doing this, the key thing was that we modeled it. So I and a youth taught youth adult partnerships. The reason why I bring up the developmental component, it's never too early to introduce the concept and the modeling of a youth adult partnership. And truly the biggest hurdle, in my opinion, is making sure that adult learners understand what that looks like. And as you were saying earlier, Sarah, it's where is it most appropriate? And if I were going to put and sorry, it's Friday, and so I'm not feeling like I'm dressed appropriately for this call. But if you can imagine looking at taking your hands and placing the right hand over the left hand, palms facing each other, and thinking of that as many times when youth are under a certain age, let's say 12 and under, that's the youth adult relationship. But then as youth begin to navigate and learn skill sets and develop, then youth and adults are side by side. And then as youth transition, they are being held up by the adults, but the youth are in charge. And I see that as the mechanism of helping people understand the transition of what adults need to learn as skills as much as youth need to gain the skills and the practices. So I like the tool being about involvement and interaction, because I think it's really important to note really how much of a change and transition can we have with adults from the beginning to end when they interact with the youth adult partnership, and making sure young people really recognize what I see as the rights to being involved as youth, and what they can expect in an ideal partnership relationship. Sorry, but that's my little sandbox there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's definitely helpful input. Like I said, with the fact that we need to work as COP to develop, the measurement tool, I think that's really good to know. So if no one else has anything to add, I just wanted I wanted us to take this conversation to our youth engagement forum, and this is the link. And so if you guys would like, to share more of your thoughts in there, or to just leave a comment or a link you think would be helpful, I don't know, anything in there something will actually be helpful. So feel free to go to the link. Of course, you need to sign up and join the COP, but let's really try to take this conversation that is really, really interesting. A lot of good points that you highlighted and you mentioned in here, but let's try to take them to our forum so that everyone in the COP can actually join. We have over 300 members, so I think that will be really helpful in trying to expand this knowledge. And also sort of just educate everyone, but work together and understand which areas do your skills and your input fit best into, so that we can deliver that tool, which I think should be ready by September. So yeah, this is it for our call today. I see that Anna shared her email address. If you guys would like to do that, maybe your LinkedIn profiles, feel free to connect. But just as a reminder, also on the Youth Power website, you can connect under the COP and add each other and talk and send messages and all sort of things that you can do similarly to LinkedIn. So if we can have the slides back, Katie, just to remind everyone on how to sign up to our website again, that would be awesome. Yeah, so just as a final reminder, please do sign up under youthpower.org. You'll find then our communities. You'll find our COP under communities, and then once you are part of the forum, you'll be able to actually post in there and talk to Sarah and Lisa and Celia and everyone else who's in the who's registered as well. So I think we can end it here. Thanks again so much, Sarah, for your presentation. Thank you to everyone present in the call. It was really indeed an amazing presentation and an informative session. Just as a reminder, we will be sharing these slides. We'll post on the forum as well once we have them up there. So you can all take a look. We'll share the recording. So just please, make sure that you stay as engaged as possible with us. Hopefully next time or the time after, we'll get to talk more about the tool. But like I said, let us start the conversation on the Youth Power website, and then from there, hopefully we can create maybe smaller affinity groups where we can communicate with each other more and easily. All right, thank you everyone. Glad to really see all of you here. Hope we'll see you again next month. if you have any questions or anything at all, feel free to post it in there. So in the COP forum, you can reach out to us. You can reach out to me as well. I think I posted my email address. So yeah, have a great weekend and have a great rest of your day, night, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world.